Happy St. Patrick's Day, you beautiful people. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. Hopefully it's been a good day at work. Maybe enjoying some time with family and friends, or maybe spending time with the boys, whatever you be doing. Hope you're enjoying it. We have some interesting moments and pieces of news that have happened today. Obviously, we had our morning segment today where we discussed the misunderstanding Canadians most likely have about what the EU and what it does, and the fact that the door is slightly being opened that Canada could join it, especially now we have Mark Carney in position as Prime Minister, who's very pro-European, as we know and we've established. And so it was just kind of more so like kind of more of a compare and contrast. Some people was like, oh my gosh, are we going to become part of the EU? Nothing on the table right now. But it was more so an interesting stat line of, well, over about 44% of Canadians would be interested in joining the EU versus about 10% were interested in joining becoming the 51st state. It was just more so a good narrative and call out to seeing what Canadians are feeling and what your fellow Canadians are feeling and their misunderstanding and almost in some ways their hypocrisy when it comes down to the issue. But we'll leave that where it is. But that was kind of what sets us up for what we are seeing today. Today on the St. Patrick's Day, we have Mark Carney's flown over to Europe to meet with Macron in France and eventually be meeting or has met with the King in the UK. And on the same one, we have Pierre Poilievre going to a steel factory, get in front of the workers, doing the very thing Mark Carney was not able to do just last week. So we'll be discussing all of that today. But the first thing we want to address is an article by the National Post. It says, first reading, Mark Carney is not really supposed to be doing, well, anything. Until approved by Parliament, a Prime Minister's executive authority is supposed to be very limited. Let's read the first paragraph here, shall we? Mark Carney now may be Canada's 24th Prime Minister, but the unique circumstances of his appointment mean that he technically shouldn't be allowed to do anything. No appointments, no new spending or taxes, no foreign policy commitments, nothing at all that isn't routine, non-controversial, and reversible. It's all part of the Caretaker Convention, a long-standing parliamentary tradition which holds that until a prime minister is able to command the confidence of the House of Commons, he's not allowed to wield the full powers of his office. In fact, he's not supposed to do almost any of the things Canadians typically associate with their prime minister. Avoid participating in high-profile government-related domestic and international events, reads an official Privy Council guide to the Caretaker Convention. It adds that this includes international visits and the signing of treaties and agreements. Caretaker prime ministers are also tasked to steer clear of appointments, policy decisions, new spending, negotiations or consultations, non-routine contracts, and grants and contributions. The only real exception to this is anything that could be deemed urgent in the public interest. So you read that. There is such thing called a Caretaker Convention, which they outlined here, and it's all those descriptors to a T. They're not supposed to be introducing these big sweeping movements or legislation or appointments, this, that, the other. He really shouldn't be doing those things. It's, again, a part of the Caretaker Convention. But the issue is the Caretaker Convention is not codified anywhere. It's not sealed in law. It's simply what they said, a tradition. You're not supposed to be doing it. But this goes back to my point I've made on the show multiple times, as well as talking here to Reg, is this has been the issue with laws and how we run things here in Canada for so long. This Liberal Party, whether it be headed by Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney, doesn't really matter. They've shown they have disdain for our institutions and how we run things in this country. And this is why we have to have such an overhaul of our conventions and how we do things here in this country. The idea of like, oh, you're the Caretaker Convention, you shouldn't be doing anything because you don't really have the confidence of the House. You don't even have a seat yet. You shouldn't be doing anything that's irreversible at this point. You should just be trying to keep things moving as they are. But has this Liberal Party, at any point, ever shown they care about doing that? No. They have broken every rule, exposed every loophole, and done everything to maintain power since Trudeau brought them in 2015. Nothing new there. So this is my problem with this article title, is Mark Carney is not really supposed to be doing anything. Well, actually, he can do whatever he so pleases. Screw convention, screw tradition. It's not law, so he can do whatever he wants, and that's technically true. And this is my issue with how we do things in this country. Everything's on a handshake. This being one of them. The Caretaker Convention. It's just a handshake. It's supposed to be good faith and good governance. But Mark Carney doesn't care. Justin Trudeau doesn't care. This Liberal Party doesn't care. All they care about is maintaining power and making sure they exercise it with absolute and utter strength. Doesn't matter what Canada wants. Doesn't matter what Canada wants. We see here from CBC Watcher, clipped this out from CPAC, Carney's statements with Macron today at a press conference.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States. With you, Mr. President.
The most European of the non-European countries. Again, it goes back to my video from this morning. This even dabbling of, yeah, we could maybe join the EU, and that might be interesting. There's maybe some appetite for it from citizens within Canada. It all kind of summarizes in this picture right here, if you see. You have Macron there on the right, you have Carney there on the left. You have Macron's national flag behind him. You have Carney's national flag behind him, the Canadian flag versus the French flag. But the problem with Macron is there's another flag beside the French flag, and that is the European Union flag, which shows you everything you need to know. France is governed by the EU. Whether you like it or not, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, that is the reality. And this is kind of a perfect picture of how that works. A government for your government. And the fact that Mark Carney's like, yeah, we're like the European country. We're the most European country of the non-European countries. There's some questions that people have about that rhetoric, especially based on the article you saw this morning. Just a quick refresher, right? Canada to be EU's 28th member, nearly half Canadians say yes. And they go into an abacus poll where people are interested in that idea. And then you have a spokesperson of the EU saying, yeah, we could explore it. So the fact that you have Mark Carney here saying, yeah, we're the most European country of the non-European countries, and the fact that this is the first stop he made after becoming prime minister instead of going to the United States, who we actually have an issue with. No, instead of going there, he went to Europe. He went to France. He's going to the UK. People have questions about that. That's a concern. Back into the theme of they're not really supposed to be doing anything. Well, he actually advised Bill Blair to look back over the F-35 contract with Lockheed Martin. And this will catch the first minute of Bill Blair's moment on Power and Politics.
Canada has agreed to is the F-35s from the United States. And yesterday, I believe it was, we saw Portugal's defense minister saying it's no longer going to buy the F-35s from the United States. With the president talking about 51st state and all of these other things, is it in Canada's best interest to buy a fighter jet from the United States right now? Are you reconsidering the F-35 contract?
I've discussed this with the Prime Minister, and we're also, it's a conversation taking place with the Canadian Armed Forces. Right now, we have undertaken to purchase 88 of the F-35 fighter jets. It was the fighter jet identified by our Air Force as the platform that they required. But we are also examining other alternatives, whether we need all of those fighter jets to be F-35s or if there might be alternatives. The Prime Minister has asked me to go and examine those things and have discussions with other sources, particularly where there may be opportunities to assemble those fighter jets in Canada, to properly support them and maintain them in Canada. And again, we're looking at how do we make investments in defense, which also benefits Canadian workers, Canadian industry, and supports a strong Canadian economy.
Look, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to, if we can figure out a way to have those built here, that's awesome. It works for us. But it's the idea of making big decisions like this that is concerning. Again, going back to the caretaker conventions. Should this be allowed? Should this be a thing? Some would say it falls into the purview because of these tariff threats from the United States. There can be an argument there. However, the way Mark Carney got in, the way he won 150,000 votes within the Liberal Party, and not necessarily got a mandate from the Canadian people, and the fact he's now going out and making these decisions is a concern to people. And it's like, yeah, I hear you. The problem we have here, it's not like he has a mandate from the population. He got some confidence from his party. And now he's going out and making some big statements and big moves on behalf of Canadians when Canadians never actually voted in support of this version of the party. And now we're looking at potentially a $5 to $8 billion bath if we canceled this deal with the United States. Again, I feel like that decision should be made by somebody who has a mandate and not necessarily someone who just got a confidence from a party. But again, it's up to you what you think. Then we have Mr. John Bolton giving some advice to Mark Carney. And John Bolton was a national security advisor to Trump's administration between 2018 to 2019, I believe it was. John Bolton said here to Carney, he says, he can make any approach he wants on substance, but he shouldn't sound like Donald Trump. He told Mercedes Stephenson in an interview that aired Sunday on the West Block, you're not going to improve things by trying to match Trump's rhetoric. Number one, no sane person can do it. And number two, it's not going to help get a better outcome. Bolton pointed to White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt's comment last week that Canada is a neighbor, they are a partner, perhaps they are becoming a competitor now. When asked if the U.S. still considers Canada a close ally as a proof of the power rhetoric has in a relationship. And this is my thing, is what we've seen from Carney is he hasn't necessarily matched rhetoric with Donald Trump, but his actions have done that. when the very first thing you do as prime minister is you decide to fly to Europe instead of going to the United States. That action in of itself is a screw you to Donald Trump. It's another way to put a finger in the eye. Nothing more, nothing less. Oh, Josh, he's trying to secure more partnerships with people in the Europe. Fine. But the problem is we have here, folks, is let's look at some stats, shall we? Last year, sorry, this is back in 2023. We don't have the 2024 numbers yet, but 2023, we did close to $1 trillion of trade with the United States. Do you know how much we did with the EU? Let's take a look. Oh, a whopping $121 billion. If you include the UK, that goes up to $144 billion. Just over a tenth of what we done with the United States. So why was it so important for him to go to Europe over going to the United States? A trade partner worth close to $1 trillion versus a trade partner that does $144 billion. What's the point? Why do that? Seems to me the only reason you're doing that is to say screw you to Donald Trump while using the cover of, we need to create more of a transatlantic partnerships and try to increase these trade numbers as the cover. Make no bones about it, my friends. This is purely and utterly a plan and shot at Donald Trump without saying anything directly to Donald Trump. That's how these liberals act. That's what Justin Trudeau did. Mark Carney's now doing the same thing. Won't do anything directly because they're soft, but their actions show all the more. And then another theory people are throwing around of why Mark Carney may be avoiding a meeting with Donald Trump is that he doesn't want to get Zelensky'd. He doesn't want to get made fun of. Doesn't want to get run over on national television by Donald Trump because that wouldn't look good in the polls. It wouldn't look good for a potential election here in Canada. So I have a feeling Mark Carney will be staying away from Donald Trump between now and an election. He might have one meeting, but it'll be a very closed door meeting, and there will be no public acknowledgement of it, like he did with Macron here. That's likely what you're going to get if anything public comes about. Or you might get a photo like Trudeau did with Trump at Mar-a-Lago back in November. You might get that, but nothing more. Nothing more than that, because Carney can't afford it. He is soft like Trudeau. You can easily run him over, and he knows it, and Trump will 100% run him over. As a finish off, we have Pierre Poilievre here, who stopped at a steel factory and gave an Axe the Tax press conference. And we'll save that conversation for another day of, is Axe the Tax really the motto you want to be going forward with? We'll talk about that another time. But more so, this imagery is more so interesting. The fact he did this press conference with real steelworkers behind him and not dress-ups of the conservative shadow cabinet behind him is, I think, is a positive. It's a plus. And it just kind of brings this meme to life here, where you have Mark Carney here and you have Pierre Poilievre here, both at steel factories. One has the cabinet behind him, the other does not. One has steel factory workers behind him, and the other does not. One is a globalist, and one says he's not a globalist. And these two images show that here, which I think is fascinating. So we'll see what goes on moving forward. But the fact that Mark Carney has made the moves he's making, deciding to run tail to Europe instead of talking to Donald Trump, the fact that he is saying that we're the most European of the non-European countries, the fact that he's trying to make Canada a little tighter with the EU should be cause for concern and something that we should all keep a very close eye on. But enjoy your St. Patrick's Day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.